Good afternoon and welcome to Florida Repertory Theater's Stage at Home virtual talkback series for Friday, June 19th, 2020. My name is Jason Parrish, your Associate Artistic Director and host for the afternoon. And also welcome to Stage at Home and happy Juneteenth to all of our viewers. I'd like to start today with a huge thank you to all of our loyal viewers. Whether you've been with us for all 11 broadcasts or you're new today, we are nothing without you. A reminder to all that Stage at Home is taking a short hiatus after next week. But for those of you who want to relive the past talkbacks, we will broadcast them every week, just like Nick at Night reruns, so you won't have to, miss us. So you can watch us on Facebook every week. As Florida Rep monitors the public health situation and makes its plans to reopen safely, we may be able to come back to the Stage at Home series later in the summer or in the fall. Either way, you know where to find us and we'll keep you informed. At the end of today's show, I'll let you know what we have in store for you for the final discussion of this unprecedented 12-week run. We know these talks will enhance your theater-going experience when we're all able to gather safely and enjoy live theater again. And for today, whether you're watching on Zoom, signed into Facebook Live, or listening to our podcast, welcome to the discussion. Take a moment to all of our participants to make sure you're muted, and we'll unmute our panelists when we get there. So last December, Florida Rep opened the first production of a play called Alabaster by Audrey Cefaly, and that officially kicked off the record-breaking 11-theater National New Play Network rolling world premiere. Playwright Audrey Cefaly's life changed that day because it meant she'd begin crisscrossing the country to watch her play come to life in theaters from Fort Myers to Cincinnati, Dallas to Oregon, and everywhere in between. Her electrifying new play has won awards, been adjudicated for the Pulitzer Prize, and it made the Kilroy's list, which annually chronicles the 33 most recommended and underproduced plays by women, trans, and non-binary authors. The play's journey is just the beginning, but for Florida Rep, the story began in 2017 when the play was submitted to the Play Lab for consideration. It was a part of the 2018 festival in May that year, and later that summer was selected to be produced in this immediately past season. Design discussions began in early 2019 ahead of the December premiere and continued to be honed all the way through the opening night. The play is about two wounded people and the scars that they carry, but it's also about the power of art to heal. Alabaster calls for the central character, June, to be covered in scars after surviving a tornado, and for her onstage bedroom to be covered with pieces of art that she's painted on barn scraps. When we went into the process, we knew that we needed to take a great deal of care with every production element, but especially the scars and the art, which are critical to the storytelling. And today we go behind the curtain on those two design elements. So today's panel are the artists and technicians responsible for making some really impressive stage magic: actress and folk artist Sara Morsey, costume designer Charlene Gross, wardrobe supervisor Andrew Burns, ensemble member and founder of Tiny Theater, coming to you from her Tiny Theater, Rachel Burttram, who played June, and of course, playwright Audrey Cefaly is with us today. Welcome to Stage at Home. A special note that also on Zoom today, there are other members of our cast: Dana Brooke, Carolyn Messina, and our stage manager and her production assistant, Ruth Kramer and Danica Murray. Plus, I should say, I'm not only your host today, but I also directed Alabaster, and I had the distinct honor to work with each of these amazing artists. So here we are. I say we begin today with Audrey Cefaly, who gave us this remarkable story to tell. So Audrey, if you wouldn't mind telling us how you got into playwriting and how you came to write Alabaster before we embark on the discussion of scars and the art that came with it.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Just want to make sure you can hear. It seems like many people in my family were writers. I was not a writer growing up or even in college. Like, my first love was performance. And it wasn't until maybe my late 20s. I did a lot of performance in the competition circuit, and I was looking for really meaty, small pieces that I could really sink my teeth into, and I just wasn't finding anything that felt rewarding. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just try to write something. And that first play won a festival, and then the second play won 3 or 4 festivals. So there were people in my life from the very, very beginning that said to me, just keep doing this. You've got something. And for the longest time, I focused on two-handers. You'll see there, I think, a picture of the Gulf. That one won the Lammy Award. It won the Edgerton. That's the Chicago production, which was spectacular. And it's two women out on a boat fishing, and the motor breaks down and their relationship breaks down, and it's pretty violent. And that one started out as a short, actually. And I dusted it off after a few years and sent it to Samuel French. And it was produced, it was produced at, in the Samuel French Off-of-Broadway Festival, and it won. And that got me a publication deal with Samuel French. And then that next picture is a picture of another two-hander of mine, which is I would consider it sort of a classic Southern love story. It's people dealing with grief, a man and a woman who live next door to each other, and they're dealing with grief. And which is a topic I traverse quite often in my pieces, particularly in Alabaster. With Alabaster, that was a piece that originally also started out as a two-hander, and it was two characters, and then I wanted to add like goats. Again, that's Maytag. That was a spectacular production at Barter Theater. And so Alabaster started out, I had an image in my head of a woman sitting on the edge of her bed covered in scars. And I wanted to know, that's it, that's the image I had in my head. A woman sitting on her bed covered in scars. And I was like, why is she sitting there? Is she alone? No, she's not alone. Someone's there. It's another woman. Maybe it's a photographer. Okay, so what is this? What is this? Why is a woman taking a picture of another woman who's covered in scars? And so it was that exploration of trying to figure out how these two women connected to each other that got me to that, the two-hander version of Alabaster that had non-speaking goats in it. And later one of the goats would be promoted to, there she is, Wheezy. In one of the workshops that we did, the character of Wheezy was promoted to a speaking part, and became really sort of the central narrator, the divine, the other, the wise mentor. People don't quite know what Wheezy is, but she's very, very important to the story. And then the other goat character, there she is, Sara Morsey, spectacular. She hardly utters a word, and yet she just completely steals the show. And so this is, it turned out to be this beautiful, beautiful meditation on grief and isolation. I think it's very resonant these days because of how isolated we're all feeling. What is it, 110 days now? I don't know what the day is now of quarantine, but the central character of June, she basically has not really left her house in years. And then this photographer comes along and kind of upsets everything, and gets things in motion. And so that's the digest version of it.
And then if you could talk a bit about the rolling world premiere process. How many times have you seen it now since the Florida Rep production? And what's that journey been like?
Wow, and what a night that was, watching you up there telling the audience, this is the very first time anyone has seen this play. I remember your speech, and I was like, hey, yeah, this is gonna be kind of, this is it. This is the first audience. So We secured the largest number of theaters for a rolling world premiere in history, with 11 theaters signing on. And after the production at Florida Rep, we went on to 16th Street in Chicago, Cap Stage in Sacramento, No Theater in Cincinnati. I'm missing one.
Dallas.
Kitchen Dog, and Shrewd Productions in Austin. And then we were scheduled to have 3 or 4 productions this summer, and then COVID, coronavirus came. So we still have 5 or 6 productions left that have been sort of put on hold. There it is on the Kilroy's list, yeah. And Kilroy's did a lot to get the play attention, yeah.
Terrific. And we're also very happy to say that it's about to be published.
That's right.
So you'll have your is this your second play published by Sam French, which is now Concord Theatricals?
It is. I mean, they published the first thing they published was The Gulf as a short play, because it won the festival, so they anthologized that. Then they published my anthology, Love's a Blue Tick Hound, and then they published Maytag Virgin, and then they published The Gulf. So for probably this will be the 5th.
Sure.
Unless you count, sometimes they do the one acts in separate publications, so that's not quite the same.
Sure.
I guess the 5th, yeah.
And then if you wouldn't mind talking to us a bit about folk art. So we're going to move on to chatting with Sara and talk about how she got involved in this process. But if you could tell us a bit about why June was painting. Why is June a folk artist? And what is folk art? What is outsider art to you? And why did it become so central to this play?
So I somehow knew that June was an artist of some kind. I didn't know if maybe she, was into ceramics or some sort of textiles, or I just knew that somehow she passed the time somehow doing some sort of art. And that's when I talked to Carolyn, who's has been my dramaturg for years, and on this play also my dramaturg. And she said, "I'm telling you, she's an outsider artist. She fits the idea of an outsider artist, like not well known, hasn't had a splash, not necessarily even doing it for any reason other than there's a compulsion to just do and to make and create, not non-conforming, experimental, found objects, very little artifice, primitive art in the spirit of like Moe's Tea and like Jimmy Lee Sudduth. I said, all right, I'm down with that. And but it in the early days, I felt as if I was trying to piece together how she and her art were working together. And then here comes this other artist, this photographer, right? And so in the early workshops, it was, what is this art? How does it relate? Is she scared to be seen? Is artist cute? And then it was in one of maybe the 3rd or 4th workshops, I heard a voice say to me, or I think there's a line where Alice says, I slept after, on a montage, I shut myself away for like 3 months or something. And I hear June say in my head, 3 years. What? 3 years? Like, I haven't left my house in 3 years. So I was like, oh shit, this character's telling me that she's been shut away for 3 years. So that's gonna really make a difference in how I think about this character, So she's gradually painting on this reclaimed barn wood of the barn that actually, I don't want to give anything away, but this barn, people died on this farm during a horrible tornado. And she's just compulsively painting on this wood, and at one point I think Alice says, what happens when you run out of wood? And so it was then that I began to like connect it all, right? If she stops painting, she'll die. Like, so she just has to keep painting. And I think that, like we have here in the DC area, the Visionary Museum in Baltimore, and it's not the only museum that does this, but there's a whole wing of this museum for people who are compulsive artists, OCD artists, and there's some Alabama artists in there that they just keep producing, because the alternative is
Sure.
the noise or the voices or death or breathing issues. Or so I thought it was a good marriage, and I have to give credit to Carolyn for that call. That was a really good call. And so we spent some time researching and talking to colleagues and talking to experts and trying to get it just right.
Fantastic. And then so when we get the script and we decide to produce the play, the script calls for the bedroom to literally be covered with, to be littered with these pieces of artwork that are done on scraps of barnwood that we decided in the design process would be sort of screwed together to make different size canvases. At which point, Florida Rep had to decide, how were we going to approach this? Were we going to ask our scene design department to design a few pieces and then we could have the paint department riff on that? Or and this is another nod to Carolyn Messina on this, who, when we were doing a reading of this play in Sacramento, she said to me at the party afterwards over probably too much wine, she said, why don't you get an actual artist? You commission an actual artist to do this, and then you have those pieces. And so that was a year before we went into production. It took about 4 or 5 months for me to remember or realize that in our ensemble of artists was actress Sara Morsey, who is herself an outsider folk artist. And until very recently, or it may still be there are murals around this theater that she sort of painted on found spaces, like in the ladies' room backstage. There was a mermaid that she painted. So a long story short, we approached Sara about first doing the artwork and then also being in the play. So Sara, I'll give it over to you, and if you wouldn't mind starting us, letting us know what it was like to read this play for the first time, and how did you come to it? Let me unmute you real quick, Sara. Let's unmute you. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, the first time I read the play was not with an eye to doing any kind of art for it or anything. It was just that I was reading, and very early in reading the play, there was this reference to not only art, but there was a reference to a particular artist with whom I was familiar. I think, I don't know, the plays had different lines in it. It was either Mose Tolliver or Jimmy Lee Sudduth, I think. It could have been even someone else, but I immediately knew what that meant and knew what kind of art was happening. And so I began to read the rest of the play with that in mind, and looking at the play that way. I became so excited about it. So I wasn't exactly reading it for looking at the art at that time, but I was riveted by that, and I was riveted by a playwright that would put that specific kind of a reference into it. So I started seeing it sort of in my mind's eye as I read through the play, which is not about the art at all, but these two artists. June is making this art that's really hidden, except for the fact that it's lying everywhere around. It's not really on the walls or being shown as art. It's just something she does obsessively. And then when, oh my gosh, I only say Dana. What's the other character's name?
Alice.
Alice, yes, okay. I just see Dana. When Alice comes, and she's this pretty well-known photographer, you know, and when she sees the art, she's immediately drawn to the fact that the art needs to be seen, as is often the case with these outsider artists. Like, I think this is maybe Jimmy Lee Sudduth being shown. Oh, it's Mose.
Yeah, this is Mose, yeah.
Okay, yeah, and he's being shown now. but you can see how really, truly primitive his art is. And he's not a person who would ever go out and say, there's Jimmy Lee. This needs to be shown. They don't do it because it needs to be shown. They do it because it's coming out of them, that they are projecting their world. And look at the paint he's using. He's using enamel paint, house paint. Some people even use mud, so it's this obsessive thing of working with whatever you have to make the art, which just sort of expresses who you are. So I immediately started thinking of June as that type of person. And the interesting thing to me as I got involved in it and realized I was going to be allowed to make the art, which was so exciting, was that I realized that for Alice to see something in this artwork, there has to be some kind of progression, for June, that she's getting better at it somehow. Or I don't know what I mean by better, but that it's so obsessive, and I myself have painted obsessively on several occasions, and this being one of them. This one more by need than by circumstance, but when you are painting one after another, they all sort of build on the ones before, and they do get better, if you will. These pictures that are being shown now are some really, really early ideas that I was painting on cardboard and things.
Found scraps.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind talking about the process. So before we started the 3-week rehearsal process, you and I were in discussions. Audrey was in those discussions. Carolyn, as dramaturg, was in some of those discussions. But the artwork creation process almost became like a relationship would be between an actor and a director. You would send me options, I would give you feedback. You would hone those options until finally. So if you could talk a bit about how you approach this differently than you would have any other sort of commission.
Well, I've never had a commission before.
Okay.
Some people have said, will you paint my dog? Things like that. Or will you paint my kid? But this, like really being outsider art, I felt so free to make it just, my interpretation of what it would be. I didn't feel like I had to reference anything in particular and just paint what I felt. This one that's being shown now is the very first painted board that I did at Florida Rep. This was the very first board I painted, and it was based on a cardboard painting. And I was a little tenuous on this one, but I was really proud of it. And I remember the first time I brought it into rehearsal, it was so exciting to be painting on these boards, because really quickly they became the boards of the barn, June's barn, which I don't want to say any more than that. Right. These are some other ones that developed this, the picture of Wheezy. We went and visited some goats for one thing. And so there was this one goat that we had originally thought was Bib, who had this split ear. And the split ear had come from trying to run through a fence, and then she didn't make it, so she just pulled back out, split her ear, And pretty quick we knew that wasn't Bib, but that was Wheezy. And so I started painting Wheezy with the split ear. And this one was, this wasn't as soon as I knew Carolyn very well, but I knew Carolyn when I painted this one that's on the left of the screen. And it was exciting to me because it felt like Wheezy to me, the other one on the right side of the screen was sort of the idea of Wheezy and Bib together. And they just started to kind of flow out. And the wonderful thing for me was being in the play, so that I was in rehearsal and I could hear the play being said by the other 3 actors. I could hear the words of the play just every day I would hear the words, and it was so inspiring art-wise, because then I would go home and I would still be hearing the words, and I would go through the script and I never had a day where I was feeling like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to paint. We need, 10 more paintings. We need 30 more. We need 40 more. I never had a day where I wasn't just inspired by the writing of the script and then the acting of the script, the bringing it to life, the hearing of it. And so much more, everything, the direction of the play, the set itself, which we began to see, and I began to see exactly how it fit in, which I had before from the drawings. But the wonderful, that it's just laying all around, and some of it is even just stacked up. Some of the pieces were never even really seen, but it didn't matter because it was just June. It felt so much like it was June to me, and I felt like she was more talented than definitely more talented than she gave herself credit for. But it's not really raw outsidery. It's a little more folky, I have to admit. And I don't know. It just was inspired. It felt right to me to make it the way it was. Every time I would be painting, I would just kind of go with how it felt. And as I brought it in, and Jason and Audrey and everybody else, the other members of the cast, Ruth and Danica, everybody would have their comments about what they liked, and there was a lot of excitement about it. As I brought it in, I bring it in 4 or 5 pieces at a time, and I felt like it was the right direction because people made me feel it was the right direction. And
And going back to what you said, that you were in the play, you got to sit in rehearsal and hear everything. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who might not have seen it, Bib is on stage the whole time. She's laying off to the side on her bed because she's not well. So Sara, in rehearsals, I told her, you don't have to be there. We're going to work this scene. But she was religious about it. She was there every day. And you told me something partway through the process, or perhaps maybe it was opening night, that every painting you painted was something that came out of June's mouth. And you showed me a page of your script. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, they all do have names. In fact, for you guys who have paintings, if you would, I want to send you all like a card with the provenance of the piece on it. I'll send you the name. If you have a painting, show me your painting and I'll send you the name, and that kind of thing. Yeah, some of them I know, almost. But,
so tell our audiences a bit about that. About that every painting that you kept notes in your script, and how did that inform?
Yeah, I did. I sort of kept notes on my script that inspired me. Sometimes the words themselves inspired me to make a painting, or I had made a painting and I would find the exact kind of title for it in the script. So they finally all had, I'm not sure they were all words of June's. Most of them were. But some of them were words of other characters, and just describing each painting has a sort of little phrase, a phrase that Audrey wrote that sort of sums up the piece for me.
Excellent, thank you, Sara. And the other thing we want to talk about is how Rachel, we're doing this play in a 3/4 thrust, which means there's audience on 3 sides. So Rachel, every night, had to paint a portion of the final piece of artwork that we see in the play. So here on we have 2 different mock-ups. You put one on cardboard for me, and then we put one on boards of what that embrace ended up being. So if you wouldn't mind talking a bit about the evolution of this piece to the final piece of artwork that we see.
Yeah, that's the final one there. And I just, the reason it even changed to that one from this one on the right of your screen now, the one on the left was just something, kind of an idea. I don't know. Why is one figure so much bigger than the other? I don't even know. There was a reason at the time. But then when I put it on the board, it became the one on the right, but that one was too tall because we had to reproduce it over and over, and it just ended up that was the wrong size. We had a lot of sizes that you see Dana holding this one here. And so I had wanted to change it up a little, and this is what it changed up to. And someone even said to me, and I can't remember who told me this, but they thought that putting the moon behind also gave the idea of maybe it was the camera lens behind, which I didn't even think of, but which I really love because it included sort of June's and Alice's vision together. So this was the final one. What happened was then Rachel had to start painting on it. She knew the colors of it. And so we made this kind of, what do you call it? Template. I had pictures of that and I didn't, but I made a template, a couple of them, 3 or 4 of them. And then Danica every night would very, hardly, you couldn't see it at all from the audience. She would trace the figures on there, and then Rach knew what the picture looked like. So she would always begin painting it. And I kind of had the idea, because I really love this idea, that she painted a lot with her fingers as much as with her brushes. And so I think Rachel sort of embraced that. And, you know, between Rachel and Jason and everything, she started putting the paint on the board with her fingers, which I really love that idea for an outsider artist. And I love the idea for myself. And I do use my fingers a lot. And so Rach had to every night sort of start this painting, and then it was put in a certain place, and when it came back out, it was the final painting. And I didn't ever see it from the audience exactly, but I think it worked very well. And I love the final image. It was, I don't know, more to the point, and I loved it with whoever told me that they weren't sure if it was the moon or if it was the photographer's lens, which
we'll never know.
Cool thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah, so much.
Thank you.
I want, before we dive into the discussion of scars, Audrey, if you wouldn't mind talking to us briefly about how other theaters have approached this artwork process, and is this particularly special? Was this more effective? Talk to us about how the art was from your point of view.
I think that this was really special. The fact that we had someone in the cast that was there every day and listening and observing, and it just became very personal. I think probably the production that stands out to me in terms of the others in the role is, you know, some of them had living artists that they used artwork of, which I commend them. I think that's wonderful. Giving artists a platform like this, I think, is fantastic. And then, but the one I think that stands out to me is the Kitchen Dog production. I was able to talk to the scenic artist on one of my trips there, and she showed me a goat that she had. I'm pretty sure it was a green goat that she had painted, and I was like, "Yeah, you're in the ballpark." I said, anything like that that's primitive, you know, I said, I'm really loving this color and this color and this color. And so it was great because she basically kind of sketched the silhouettes on a bunch of wood and pieces of scrap and substrates that had come from the strike of the prior show. And they had a meetup. I think it was LGBTQ meetup, and a bunch of friends and family of the theater came, and she gave them, you know, the right colors and everything, and so it became like 20 or I don't know, it was a bunch of people that contributed to the art there. And I think there was one in particular that she painted for me that was kind of out of the way of the audience, but she's like, that one I did just for you. And
That's wonderful.
so I love the idea in that it was a collective of people with some supervision. I think if you don't actually have, and some of those people, as I understand it, a good portion of those people were artists, but some of them I don't think were. But if you just say, use your colors and this is sort of what you're drawing, that primitive nature of the art. And I really loved what they came up with. It was all very different creatures and animals and spirits and angels and butterflies, and like just very vibrant, beautiful palette. And there's some of them decided to put the art on the walls, and some of them decided to, pile them up in corners, sort of like how we did. So, and the styles are very, very different. I think Kitchen Dog is probably the closest to ours in terms of style.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Before we dive into the discussion about the scars, Charlene, we're coming to you next, so you're on standby. Rachel, I wanted to ask you real quick before we jump into the next topic. What was it like to play the artist, to do the play with Sara, who you know so well, and then for her to be essentially your character's paintbrush? So if you could talk a bit about that process.
Yeah, that's really sweet. I love this question. Sara's one of my very best friends in the world. And so it was incredible because we talked about this a lot, that because we are in real life so close, I knew where Sara was coming from. I could look at the painting and know why, where, how, and to what extent. I don't paint nearly like Sara does, but I myself paint a little bit too, just for fun. Nobody looks at it but me. And so it was fun to have an opportunity to play that, to imagine myself in that world, and to actually have the challenge of painting live. Our production, for anyone who didn't see, was really choreographed, that section of the painting. So we had a piece of music, and it's live theater, and it's real paint, and it's my fingers, and there's water, and there's all kinds of things. So it's always different. Every single, how many runs was this? It was like
40 something, yeah.
45 or something. So it was 45 different, different end results of what June finished with. I mean, so that was really fun because it's happening right there. But I loved talking to Sara. She would call when she would be painting sometimes, or we would talk in the mornings after she had been painting all night long, and so, it's always fun to see what did she do last night. And I felt very much a part of that, even though it was Sara, because just that relationship we have outside of work.
Absolutely. And one final word about the artwork. I wanted to shout out to our set designer, ensemble member Richard Crowell, who was really instrumental in some of the early phases of how these pieces were put together. So thank you to Richard. Also to our paint department led by Isabella Trevino. So in addition to the boards having to have paint, the artwork painted on them, they actually were wood boards that had to be distressed to look like reclaimed wood, so that we could control the color and the texture. So those boards had to be painted by the paint department to look like reclaimed wood. They had to sit and dry, and then they could go to Sara, who would then paint the artwork on top of those. So it was an army of people who were putting those things together. So kudos to all of those people. And Ruth Kramer, our stage manager, who's on the call. Wave, Ruth. There was a whole choreography of artwork. Some of the pieces had to be touched, so they got taken from the stack that they were in and put in other places. And so they really had paperwork that was probably an inch thick that talked about where those pieces needed to go and who they were and what they were called and who touched them. So thanks to Ruth and Danica for getting us through that process night after night after night and resetting those. And now we'll talk about the other element that made this play really, really quite special and challenging, and gave us an opportunity to learn and to grow. So Charlene Gross, if you wouldn't mind talking to us about your process, what did you think the first time you read the script, and then where did we go?
So I have to say it's the first time in a very long time I picked up a script. I started reading it, and my heart stopped, and I think I sent Jason a gooey note about how much I liked it, and he thought, who is this person? She's never, I mean, we've worked together plenty of times, so I never get emotional like that over a script. And I will say that it was moving enough that I actually didn't even stop to go, scars all over her body? We can't do that. I said, no, I'm in, I'm doing this. And as a not outsider artist, but someone who actually paints really, I was a little sad that it wasn't me doing the paintings, but I knew I didn't have time, and I was blown away by what Sara brought to the table. And I thought, no, only Sara could do paintings for this show, so that was perfect. And I had plenty of research and development to do on scars and kept plenty busy throughout. Because like you said, Jason, we started in September or August?
Yeah, you and I probably started talking about this in, September, August, September, somewhere around there.
It was really early on, and you were very worried about him. I said, no, we're gonna find a way to do it. We're gonna do this, it'll happen. And it did. And there were a couple things that started from the beginning that were really important, right? Audrey, you put some real specifics in there about how many and what they were. We knew that it had happened a few years prior, but it was still very raw. On a personal note, I have a couple serious scars on my body that I got as a small kid at different points in times, like we all do, but I have one very major one. And I know that these scars don't go away in 3 years. It's usually decades, if ever, that you start getting feeling back and how it feels. And doing the research is not always, I love research, don't get me wrong, but this research is very raw. It's very emotional. And it's not the easiest stuff to find. People tend to look at the destruction of homes more than destructions of people after the fact. So actually finding images of what people look like after a tornado who survived turned out to be harder than one would think. So we went down the route of finding other scars that would be similar. And then also thinking through the process of, we knew June had a series of surgeries and what those surgical scars would look like. And that became a big conversation between Jason and myself, Audrey, Jason and myself, other people working on
Rachel,
the show.
yeah.
Rachel came into the conversation about what are we going to see? How are we going to see them? Which scars kind of tell the story we want to tell? And then the process, I think the other thing, Jason, we talked really early on that you wanted some dimension to these.
Oh yeah, in the studio we had to, yeah.
Yeah, and we're very close, right? We're not even 10 feet away from you at points, Rachel. So what that meant. So I had done a process called Bondo previously. So we started, actually, Jason, would you go to the next slide and we'll come back to this. I have a student, Caitlin Cunningham, who's in the corner there, who is actually leaving me at Penn State to go study makeup and hair. So she jumped on my bandwagon, and I actually hired her as someone to help me carve and mold and make all these molds. So the brown are actual positives, what the scar will look like. And those take, I don't know, maybe anywhere from an hour to 5 to 6 hours to make, based on other research we have and where they're going on the body. And then the blue, that bright blue, is actually a mold that we would made of all of them. So we had these multiple molds to use. But it took us a while to get to the process. We had made a couple different kind and thinking about scale and where they're going on the body. But if you go back to your first one, Jason, we made all of these, and I was down for fittings down at Fort Myers, and I said, Rachel, can we try a couple of these to see where we want and how they fit? And you said, sure. And then I left, and luckily, Rachel, I'm sure you'll thank me for not sending these photos because I promised to destroy them after I had them. I realized we had talked about a couple specifics, but what I actually needed was Rachel's face and Rachel's body. So one of the other costume designers and ensemble members at Florida Rep, who happens to be a close friend, was doing another show down there, and Stephanie Genda wrapped Rachel in a saran wrap, her whole body, and her shoulders, and where I needed on her face. So this photo of the man is one from another process. It is definitely not Rachel, but we basically did that all over her body and marked where highlights and shadows went, so I knew how big everything had to be. And you use these molds. You can see Andrew knows this process way better than he wishes to admit. But
we'll talk to Andrew about this process in a little bit. Sure.
You make all of these things, and you actually have to pour them in the mold, and you freeze them, and you hand paint them all, and you then put that white paper is actually tattoo paper, and they go on like temporary tattoos. And little did we know, actually looking back, we were having lots of, we started to have a couple hiccups in how to get items. And it turns out some of this stuff was actually, COVID was already starting to affect our lives back in December.
Yeah. Supply chain in China, yeah.
Yeah, supply chain was slowing down. I get most of my makeup stuff from LA, where most of the big special effects makeup stores are.
And so what is it we're seeing here? Tell us about this decision late in the process, just before we went into tech.
We had figured out what we wanted to look like. We had made them all. And I had done a sketch of where we wanted them. But we realized figuring out some of the nuances of them might take a little bit. And Kylie Mask was Rachel's understudy. So what better way, she probably never thought this would be an understudy, but she was game. And I said, can I use Kylie to lay out the scars and what I think the map is, so we can look at it under lights, give Rachel a little break from this very intense show she's already on.
And it was also sort of necessity because it was rehearsal hours. We were only allowed to rehearse Rachel so many hours a week, and it was important that we have her in rehearsal. So I think Ruth and I said to you, what if we gave you Kylie for the 3 hours so that we can have Rachel in the rehearsal room?
And it also gave Rachel a chance to see them, right?
Yeah.
You never really see them and touch them. I remember Rachel coming in after we did these, and she went, oh, I can actually see what it looks like and how they move. And then it allowed Andrew and I and the rest of the team to kind of work with Kylie and figure out, if you're hunched over, right, or your face is in the mud from these, where do they hit? Where were these surgery scars? Okay, what's it mean? And you can see these, I'm pointing at the screen as if it says blast on her shoulder. We had named all the different molds. And it allowed us to really map that out. And a couple of them, you probably can't see very well, had arrows how to move them front and back. Mm-hmm. Which helped us kind of adjust things and then take photos and do a real layout map. Just like the paintings, there was lots of paperwork to these. And this is a really great shot of that mold that we made. So that is your negative, and then the positive without the paint on it, and then after painting it. And number 7, I think, was gash.
Right.
Andrew's like, you're correct.
Right.
And this is what it looks like before the tattoo paper goes on, and then afterwards. And then on stage. I
think it's worth mentioning that in addition to all of this, you had costumes to design as well.
Well, yeah, there were some clothes, but the clothes for this one, while simple, sometimes the simplicity is the hardest part, right? So I'd be sitting there having these conversations. Rachel, we talked lots, like, okay, so I have this scar on my neck. How does this robe, how many robes do we go through? How does it fall off? What does it catch on? How do we make it look like it is something hers without also distracting? And then how to make it come together as a whole. And we added, I think, did we make one for you? I think we made the front one for you. Did I add it at the end, the sternum?
Yeah, there was a big surgical scar, which we didn't take photos of.
No, but we added certain things based on not only Audrey's script, but also how the team works together. And I think it goes like the paintings, right? It was this constant conversation. This show felt like such a family to me, that it was so wonderfully refreshing to have these constant conversations. And sometimes it's hard, right? You're a little raw and you're trying to do it, but it became this great experience of, oh, we need to see the hand more. What if the face moves up? What does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, what does it mean for when she got those injuries and the pain she went through to have those surgeries?
Yeah, thank you, Charlene. Thank you so much for taking us through that process. I know, even as the director of the play, I was amazed at every turn of the road at how it turned out, and it was just remarkable to watch you and your team work. So thanks to all of you. Andrew, we're going to come to you next. Andrew Burns was our wardrobe supervisor. Before we go to Andrew, I did get a note from Drew, our technical director, to tell me that the painted boards that Sara painted on, those were managed not by the paint department, actually, but by the props department. So kudos rather to Shannon Rossi and her team in the props department for putting those boards together. So thank you, Drew, for catching that. So Andrew, tell us what your job was on this process. Were these scars reused every night, or did we have to do new scars every night? Tell us about this.
So my role in the process as wardrobe supervisor, specifically with this show, was to make sure that we had enough scars every night. They were not reusable at all. It was a one-time only. You apply it to the body with the tattoo paper. Tattoo paper comes off, and at the end of the night, we had to take them all off, all 23, and have another new set the next day, every single day. And I think we had about 34 days of performances. We only applied them once a day. So on 2 show days, we would have application before show number 1 and removal at the end of the night after the second show. But that's roughly, you multiply 34 by 23, that's roughly 782 scars that I had made throughout the process. And not only that, but then you have to account for any extras that were needed in case there were problems, in case ones were painted incorrectly, or they got stuck to themselves, or any other issues that wasn't wanting to come up with that tattoo paper. So I made roughly anywhere between 800 and 900 scars throughout the entirety of the process of the show, beginning to end.
And so we had to make sure, I remember you and Ruth and Rachel talking about, you had to make sure that there was a balance of scars so that if something went wrong, you still had a couple of days worth to get yourself through. Talk us a bit about that.
So there were 15 different scar molds that Charlene had made for the production. And some scars we only used 1 of, but there were others that we used 2 or 3 of a day. And so when you're trying to keep up with that, it can be difficult when the process is so long to get them all made. So the process starts with, you get the Bondo cream into the mold, get it into the freezer, which takes about an hour for them to set, and then getting them out of the mold. They have to dry for 24 hours before you can do anything else to them. So with that process, it takes a while when you need 2 or 3 a day of certain scars to have the right amount that you need. So I would always make sure I had enough of every single scar that looked similar enough to ones that we used 2 or 3 of a day, just in case there was any issue. So like if number 10 we only had 1 of, but we needed 2, it looked enough like number 11, and I could just substitute in number 11 to look similar enough to where it didn't make too much of a difference. But it was, I'm not sure if that fully answers.
No, that makes, yeah, that answers my question. And so what is it we're looking at here, Andrew?
So what you're looking at here is I had made on our Alabaster costume Bible, which was just where we kept all of our documents electronically, I had created what I deemed my scar inventory list, and it was my way of keeping track of how many of each scar do we need per show. Okay, how many do I have completed right now? What's currently needing to get powdered and painted? What needs to dry still before it can do that, and how many do I have in the freezer right now. So I constantly updated this list every single day as I made them, so that I knew exactly what my inventory was. And not only that, but also Charlene would know, and my boss, the costume shop manager, Brooke Arthur, would know. Like, anyone who had access to this costume Bible knew exactly where I was in terms of scars, so that there was no ifs, ands, or buts about what we had per day. It was just a really easy way to keep track of what I needed for each day.
Sure. Thank you. And so, Rachel Burttram, if you'll join the discussion, if the two of you could sort of talk us through what was a day in the life of putting these scars on. When did your for an evening show at 8 o'clock, when did you get to the theater? How long did this process take? And then, Andrew, what did you do once the show went up?
Yeah, great. So first of all, I mean, I feel like I need to come through the screen and hug Andrew's neck. We became very, very good friends by virtue of all kinds of things, not the least of which this fantastically talented young person was literally like helping me as I sat there, basically without clothes, I guess I can say that. So we became very good friends, thank God for Andrew. And so, so yes, you know, I am one of those weird actors where I like to get to the theater an hour before the show if there's no scars. So I modulated a little bit because we found we got better as time progressed, but we found that it took about an hour to 45 minutes to get me into all of these, because what would happen, I would do anything that I could reach. I would apply anything within my arm's reach. So this is my dressing table. And so the things that are on the left are some of the scars that I would put on myself. And then the ones on the right are the ones Andrew would apply to my back and my lower back and my shoulders. So he would be working behind, I would be working on the front, and then we would powder everything down. I'm a person that really likes to check my own props. So I would put on a fake robe, not our show robe, run out in the house, check my props real fast, and then we'd come back and we would apply more powder and paint as needed. And that's the photo you see there. So this is the scars on the legs. This was a 2-show day on the left, and I'm putting my street clothes back on over the scars. Then Andrew, I would do my neck and face, but Andrew would help me paint all of that. So that's Andrew, and that's a collaboration photo in the center. And then the show, the final show that we did, we believed in solidarity together. So Andrew applied scars, as well as Kelsey, who was a young person who was helping us as well on occasion to take off the scars after shows. And so that was all of us wearing scars on the very last day together. What we are looking at here on the left is the remover. So as tedious as it sounds for 45 minutes to an hour putting them on, what we learned very quickly was taking them off was the real challenge. So we incorporated a third person into our routine, right, Andrew?
Yep.
And then this center, very peculiar picture is what's left behind of all of Andrew's hard work after we're taking them all off. And there's a picture of my dressing table on the far right. So Andrew, what would you say at the end of the show, how long did it take us really to get all this good stuff off?
To get it off on a good night, at minimum 45 minutes. On a bad night, anywhere from, we tried to not make it take longer than an hour, just out of respect for Rachel's time and our time.
Because Andrew still had to do costumes after the show. This wasn't his only problem. So he still had to do all the laundry and all of that stuff. So yeah, so we really bonded, so to speak. No pun intended. But on 2 show days, what we found is the adhesive really sticks to my skin. So the longer they stayed on, the harder they were to get off.
Right. Wow, it sounds so. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind telling us, if I remember correctly, once the show started, once Rachel went out on stage, didn't you start on the next batch? Is that sort of the process?
So for me, in terms of my game plan for the day, every single day, I would come in 2 hours before start of show, and normally crew call is an hour and a half before start of show. But I wanted to make sure I got in a half hour early, because I needed to make sure I had enough for Rachel that day. If I needed to paint any extras, or if I needed to get them onto any extras onto tattoo paper for the day, make sure I had myself set. Then when Rachel came in at an hour before, we would get her into scars. We'd take about 20 to 30 minutes to get them all on. She would go check her props, come back. I would do the paint. And the second I knew she was all set and ready to go, I would then return to what we all deemed my scar factory. I had taken over about 2 different tables backstage.
Yeah.
Not even just one. I took over 2 tables and also the entirety of the freezer. So if anybody wanted to bring in ice cream or anything that needed to be frozen, that was not allowed, because I pretty much needed as much space as possible. And during the show, I was on headset. And for anyone who saw the show, there wasn't many costume changes that I needed to be around for. And in case anybody needed me, they could just say, hey, Andrew, we need you. But I would be backstage working on whatever batch I needed to, whether I needed to get scars into the freezer or paint them. And thankfully, Kelsey, who was another costume intern with me, was backstage on Barefoot. So if ever I needed assistance, like somebody just cutting the acetate paper, which is what we put over the molds to get the scars out,
Right.
Or if I needed her to cut the tattoo paper, that way I could focus on painting or getting the Bondo cream into the molds. Anything that she could do to help me, she would. But I would make sure I had a game plan every single day, and I'd be backstage just making scars during the show pretty much the entire time. On a 2-show day, I could normally get, as long as I was prepared, I could normally get anywhere from 5 to 8 sets of scars in and out of the freezer. And on a 1-show day, as long as I was like fully prepared, I could get at least 2 to 3, if not 4, if I was really pushing it, in and out of the freezer.
Yeah. Amazing. We have a couple of, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Rachel. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. Did every theater in the Rolling World premiere do their own artwork, asks Darlene. And Audrey, you spoke to that a bit, but the short answer is yes, every theater did their own process. Some of them are, they're all aware that we have it, right? If they're interested. And then we also wanted to, Darlene also asks, do the scars in Alabaster make it a difficult play for theaters to produce, or is this just normal? So Audrey, if you'll talk briefly about your experience with it, has that been a deterrent for anyone?
You know, I had trouble even in the beginning. I consulted a friend and I said, am I crazy to put goats in a play? Am I making this unproducible? And my friend was like, hell no. Theaters live and die for this stuff. And it kind of was true. I've spoken to a lot of people that optioned this play, and one of the draws was the really cool opportunities for directors and artists to, because you've got, I mean, the list is long. You've got a tornado that blows across the stage, you've got the scars, you've got the talking goats and what are they wearing, you've got the artwork, and then
camera equipment,
it's camera equipment. And whether people want to use it, I think it says in the script that it's a virtual canvas, and so however a lot of people use projections to do that interpretation. And so I really thought all that would be a deterrent. No, the theaters love the theatricality of it, and they love the challenges of all the design challenges. I do have one question.
Yeah.
This is a bit of trivia. Didn't somebody have to go on a road trip?
Yes.
Don't forget that part. What was that about?
So that was,
they didn't go all the way to China, but
no. So Aaron Martin, who's on the call without his video, is our company manager. We ran into, we had issues getting the remover, that telesis, which is what we showed you. And so there was a worry that it wasn't going to get here in time because it was the only thing that got the scars off of Rachel's skin without pain and irritation. And so I believe that we sent Aaron to Miami or Orlando to try to pick some up. And while he was gone, the package showed up, I believe.
And I said, don't show anyone, we're hiding it. And Aaron was like, no, I'm going to show it. I said, we are hiding that?
Yeah, but Aaron and
Thank
Caitlin
God
drove.
we had it. Thank God we had it, right, Andrew?
Yeah.
We're hiding.
I would rather have more than not enough. Charlene, if you'll talk about that scars
Yeah, and I
issue.
think that's what you said many times, Jason. I'd rather have more than not enough. So I can also talk to the scars. I mean, Audrey, I don't know if you know this. I think I've talked to just about every costume designer scheduled after me to do this show. And we worked, like, this show is really exciting because it leaves up so much open interpretation to design and how to direct it. And none of us wanted to steal anything from each other, but we were all curious of how we were thinking. I think that was one of the first things we started, and you helped us start like our own little chat group. And we talked about process and different options, and, you know, can they be flat tattoos or just painting them on, and time considerations, and how much you see and how much you don't. So it just becomes, I think, this show creates, at least for us, and I think it's true for everybody else I talk to as part of the rolling premiere, creates such a community of artists across the board, both of the performers and the design, the creative team, and it just makes this little nucleus that everybody wants to be in it together. And then poor Andrew, and then, well, Aaron Martin already knew this about me. I'm such a taskmaster. I was like, he can make him during the show. We got time. And Andrew's like, well, I was like, we got time. We'll lay it out. So, you know, and you figure out how to make it work. And my poor apartment, sorry about that, Aaron, you know, laying them out and figuring out how, and making sure Andrew had enough to get him started through previews, right? My poor child is probably scarred, no pun intended. He just goes, oh, those are mom's scars everywhere.
Right.
But it's just, it's part of the joy of creating. And I think Darlene just asked the question, why don't we share more? I think there were conversations of sharing Sarah's work. There was conversation of sending my molds to different theaters. And I think at some points, creatives want to do that. Like,
It's proprietary, right?
Right. But it's an easy solution, but you also want to make it your own sometimes. Sorry, Jason.
Yes, absolutely. No, sure. I mean, you were going to say the same thing I was going to say, is that I wouldn't want to do this process any other way. I wouldn't want to have been deprived of having had the chance to work with Sarah on the artwork, or to have a discussion with you about how these scars needed to look. And so every director will come at it with a different vision. Audrey said something early in the process. Could the scars be done with light? Could they be imaginary? You know, so a theater's budget size is also part of this conversation as well. Some people might not have the resources to go in one direction or another. I think this play will end up going down in history, sort of like Avenue Q and the Puppets, and Little Shop of Horrors and its plant. It will have common knowledge will go with it. The work that Charlene did will travel with it. The information about how we approach the artwork with an artist will probably be, you know, information that goes along with the play, and it will inform people as they make their own production of Alabaster. We're getting close to the end of our time. So we have a question on Facebook. Did these actors do all of the shows, or did each venue have its own actors? So if one of you, Audrey, if you wouldn't mind, or Rachel, answer that question.
I can answer it.
Sure.
One of the stipulations of the National New Play Network Rolling World Premiere is that each production, although we share intelligence and learn from each other, the stipulation is that in order for the play, for the health of the play, the because one of the primary objectives of the rolling world premiere is to allow the play more than one shot at an opening, more than one shot. That's one way of putting it, but basically, it's the recognition that, you know, just because a play opens at a theater, a world premiere, that doesn't mean that it's done. And a lot of critics know that. They're like, you know, well, when it goes to Chicago, maybe it'll tighten up, or when it moves to New York, we know that this is what happens with plays as they progress through the circuit. But not every writer at a certain level gets that. But that's what NNPN provides, is an opportunity for the play to progress 2, 3, 4 productions, in this case 11. And so I'm not rewriting the play, but refining the play based on what I see at at the next stop, and like, what are they contributing to it? What have they found out that I haven't seen before? And seeing different actors in the roles is a big part of that. Some of them are incredibly good at improvisation, or you know, and so in the parts where it says, you know, ad lib, or what, you know, the things that they bring to it are just incredible. And so I'm always just listening and watching and thinking, how can I distill this even further? You know, I really didn't make big changes though at the other stops so far. A lot of, you know, most of what we did in Florida has stood the test of time. I'm just trying to distill it a little bit and make sure that it's as clear and concise as it can be.
And very shortly, very soon, those of you who are interested will be able to buy your own copy of the script on Concord Theatricals. And inside the script, we'll have all the information about Florida Rep's production and about the Rolling World premiere. Greg Longenhagen, our artistic director, asked to say a few things before we wrap up. Greg?
Thanks, Jason. You know, I just want to piggyback on something that Audrey just said too. I think it's so important, and Audrey touched on it. You know, I have so many friends who are writers and who are, if they've been fortunate enough to get a full production at any theater company, especially a regional theater company, that's often what happens is they get one shot at it, and then that's it, and then you never hear about that title again, and it's so sad, because you know, there was a time in our history here, our theater history in this country, where that wasn't the case. Plays were workshopped and tweaked, even in the commercial theater. I mean, years ago, Broadway shows, they would take them out, rewrite them, they would tweak them, they would run them in the regions, and you just don't, you know, I know it's for fiscal reasons, but you just don't see that anymore. So I love, Audrey, that you're able to get that this happened. I mean, Jason and I were so excited when we, you know, not just because we were tooting our own horn because, wow, it's getting 11 productions across the country, but that, you know, that this play was that you were gonna have that experience, and that the play would have that life. It's so important. And I bring that up just for members of the panel, but the thing I wanted to say before I have to leave, is that I was, you know, when I read the play, and I love the play, and when I read the play and Jason and I were talking about, okay, this is in the season, and you know, I looked at the scars, or the advent of the scars in the script. You know, some plays, I think you can do it where it doesn't have to be naturalistic, where you don't actually have to, you know, see those scars. They can be in the mind's eye of the audience member. But it just seems so that this seemed to lend itself so much to a naturalistic setting, and we knew we were going to be doing it in the studio, right? It's so close up, it's so intimate in there, that these scars had to be really, really believable. And I couldn't be more proud of everyone who lent their craft, their artistry to this production. But I gotta tell you, those scars were really fantastic, and in the design, Charlene and Andrew, in the realization, and Rachel, you know, anybody who's been in the theater long enough has worn some scar, but to wear that many on your body, God bless your skin, because I know what that means to your skin when you know, no matter what type of adhesive you're using, it's a foreign agent against your skin. But no, I just wanted to say that I I couldn't be more proud of the work, and I thought that the scar work was just exceptional, and it had to be.
Greg, would you agree that there's a moment where we see the full extent of the scars on her back, and I mean, you could hear a pin drop, because she's clothed for a good part of it, and then there's this moment where she lowers her robe, and it was just like the entire theater took a gasp. And I didn't have that experience. I haven't had that experience since on the road with other theaters. They take a different take with it.
Yeah.
But Rachel was very brave. She wasn't, there was some brief nudity there, and she really let us see the extent of it. And for me, that's huge. Don't just hint at some scars. If you're going to do it, let us see just how bad it is. And so I'm with you, Greg. I just thought it was breathtaking.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you all. And I wanted to also, we mentioned our set designer, we mentioned the props department, and I also want to shout out, as Audrey mentioned earlier, this play has not just scars. It doesn't just have folk art, but it also has projections, and we had a remarkable projections designer, Rob Seiler, who you all met if you were on our call a few weeks ago for A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, but Rob did the lights and the projections design. And then it also has photography. So Brielle Daffeldecker and Joe Daffeldecker took a lot of the photographs that were supposed to be Alice's photos. So we had to learn how to be expert photographers. We had to learn how to be expert artists. This play really did provide so many opportunities for our ensemble members and our technicians and our interns to learn and to grow. So Audrey, thank you for this play, and thank you for all of the amazing healing words that you brought into the world.
I'm so grateful that you took a chance on it, and you putting it forward and submitting it for the Rolling World premiere. I mean, what you did effectively is open it up to the world so that they could see what it was. And because of you, because you guys took a chance on this play, I go all around the country, and the women that are in this play are just devastated. It's so beautiful, and it's such a wonderful play for women to explore their humanity and their grief, that ache and longing. Is every single character in this play is just facing a wall of fire. And so it's a very healing play. I felt it in Florida, and I feel it every stop that I go to. I feel it. I think this play is really helping people. And so thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any final thoughts from anyone on our panel? Rachel, Andrew, Sarah, Charlene. Final thoughts for our audiences, what you hope they'll take away from this?
I just thought, even with all the work that it took to do it every night, I just want to say how much, it was so important to all of us, because when we talk about design beforehand or in tech and all of that, it's the actors who are out there at night doing it, and so when an audience is sitting in the dark watching somebody tell a story, an actor tell a story, all the work that you're doing as an actor to create that willing suspension of disbelief, if the scars didn't look good, all the work that we did to create that illusion would fall flat, right? But as Audrey said, when the robe dropped, people were already invested, and then they were invested even more for the rest of the story. So it was greatly appreciated of all the hours and hours and Bondo and paint and remover that went involved, because the audience really took away a powerful experience, I think. So thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all.
And that moment, Rachel, is one of the many hairpin turns that we take in this play. Like, it just seems like we're going along, and then suddenly it's like, whoa, no, we're here now, and oh, we're here. Oh, I thought it was, oh, it's really bad. Oh, it's worse than and so, like you said, it's one thing to put all the work in, but it has to read. It has to read to that last person in the last row. And that's what I thought was so effective about the meticulous work involved in that and in all the craftsmanship was that it read. And I give you credit, Jay, for tracking that you're so specific. The details are so important to you.
Yeah.
And you didn't miss anything. I'm just blown away, really, by your work on this.
Thank you, Audrey. Any other final thoughts from our panelists? All right. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all so much for joining us for our 11th week of Stage at Home. Let's have one more virtual round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us. To our Stage at Home viewers, a reminder that all the past talkbacks are available on YouTube and Facebook, on FloaterUp's pages, and we're also now a free podcast on Spotify, Google Playlists, Anchor, Breaker, and Radio Public. We hope to see you next week for our final Stage at Home before a summer hiatus for a talk with the director and the cast of our 2019 production of August Wilson's Fences. So director Benny Sato Ambush, a renowned regional theater director, artistic director, and an August Wilson scholar, will join us for a discussion with the cast about their careers, as well as about bringing the Pulitzer Prize winning American classic to life on our stage back in January of 2019. So please don't miss next week's discussion. I also wanted to make sure you know that Florida Repertory Theater's Theater for Young Audiences series is online for streaming. So our January production of William Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, starring this year's past acting interns, is available to stream for just $12 on FloaterRep.org and FloaterRepEducation.org. It's an excellent production, and your ticket support will help FloaterRep immeasurably during this intermission. So to sign up for next week or for updates about FloaterRep and Stage at Home, please follow us on Facebook, make sure you're on our email list, or visit the news and events page on FloaterRep.org. And again, thank you all for spending the afternoon with us. While we can't yet gather in the theater, we will see you there soon. So from all of us at FloaterRep, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.